Welcome, everyone. I'm Spencer Stewart. I'm Chancellor of WGU Nevada, and this is WGU Live. Today we've got a wonderful topic. We're talking about Character Day. Character Day has become a global movement. It started about 5 years ago, and today there are over 200,000 organizations across the globe focusing on character development. I'm joined by my colleagues, a wonderful group of individuals. To my right is Dr. Rashmi Prasad, our academic VP within the College of Business, Dr. Jan Joan Schenk, our academic VP within our College of Healthcare, Dr. Deb Eldridge, our academic VP within our Teachers College, and John Baldry, our VP of Operations in our College of IT. Thanks so much for being part of this panel today. This is a really exciting topic. And I think one of the big questions is, why talk about character? Why is character important? So if you'll allow me, I'd like to set the stage for our discussion today. A few years ago in the New York Times, a columnist, some of you might know him, David Brooks, penned, I think, a wonderful essay on the meaning of life and how character is so important. And so I quote, "It occurred to me that there are two sets of virtues, the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the skills you bring to the marketplace. The eulogy virtues are the ones that are talked about at your funeral. Whether you were kind, brave, honest, or faithful, were you capable of deep love? We all know that the eulogy virtues are most important, or more important than the resume ones. But our culture and our educational systems spend more time teaching the skills and strategies you need for career success than the qualities you need to radiate that sort of inner light. Many of us are clear on how to build an external career than on how to build inner character." Those are some bold statements. Rashmi, do you agree with David Brooks?
Well, I certainly do, but of course it's easy to be agreeable. I think that the conventional wisdom would say no. Actually, it's the CV virtues or the resume virtues that count. That's what helps get you ahead. But I would, as you're asking the question, I would make one simple observation. Take the world of business, for instance. It is not unusual for someone to be very successful up to a point and then to derail. Some catastrophe happens. There's some setback. We're all horrified. Whether it's mistake, misconduct, or error, somebody's career really falls apart and they start to fall apart personally. And usually when you go to the root of that, the story, it's some missing character element that leads a person to overreach, to treat somebody else badly, or to be blindly ambitious. So actually the eulogy virtues, character virtues, are important not only for the end of one's life when you take stock and ask what it was all about, what it was worth, but frankly, we all encounter terrible, terrifying, pressure-packed moments in our life, and those are the moments in which character, it's like an insurance policy. Of course, it also makes you easier to live with every day. So I would say, in a nutshell, I would say character counts, and it's underrated, and it's now being appreciated once again.
Well, I'm excited that WGU is focusing on character development, but as I understand it, this just didn't happen out of thin air. Jen, I'm told you had something to do with this. Is that right?
Well, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and sometimes serendipitous things happen. I was at a meeting in Texas in June, and it's a World Positive Education Accelerator meeting, and I happened to hear all of these great speakers talk, and one of them was talking about Character Day. And they were talking about the creation of this movement, and there were a couple of wonderful short videos. I hope some of the people watching will look at those videos. And they were talking about the importance of character in education, in career success, etc. And so as they talked, I texted my colleague Deb and said, Deb, this is this is happening right now, real time, and I think it really has a lot of relevance for us in the College of Health. What do you think about the college, the Teachers College? And she responded affirmatively, and from there we gathered together the rest of our colleagues, and we found there was great resonance around this topic and the great need for all of us who are all works in progress to place some emphasis on this.
That's wonderful. Deb, let's start with you. But before doing that, I want to speak to our viewers as we have this discussion. If you could comment and tell us what you think your favorite character trait is and why. At the end of the show, we'll take some time to discuss your comments and questions. Now, Deb, you run one of the largest teachers' colleges in the country. You impact many lives. If you think about that multiplier effect, as you think about your students, your alumni, the profession as a whole, what are some of the character traits that most align with the professionals that you credential?
Great question, and one of the reasons I was eager to jump on board when Jan reached out to talk about Character Day, because as we prepare teachers, the resume qualities are about what do you know and what can you do as a teacher. But more importantly are those what we call dispositions. Those are the character traits that make for an exciting, engaged, effective teacher. And here at Western Governors University, Teachers College has identified 8 what we call dispositions, and I aligned those dispositions with the periodic table of character strengths, which is a part of this Character Day event. And in doing so, I found that 4 out of our 8 characteristics align.
One teaches character, I think, is a great topic. But before getting to that, John, let's shift to IT. I don't know if there could be any 2 disciplines more
They're very similar.
Okay.
More than one might think.
That's so different, right?
Yeah. There are some differences, but let's see. Are there differences when it comes to the characteristics that you'd like to see in your alumni?
So certainly in our alumni and our current students that are here at the university, even within our employees who are helping to guide and steer those students through their degree programs, etc. I think we really pride ourselves in the College of IT around a couple of the themes, one around courage and one around wisdom, that our employees, perhaps more than some others across the university, are always on the cutting edge of the new frontier. We've constantly got change within our college. In fact, tomorrow something will be outdated that was introduced today. And so our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, their willingness to be engaged in the learning process, to be naturally curious, to be brave on some fronts, to be able to find ways to forge the new frontier, to innovate into those new spaces that arise each day, become a really important part of who we are and who we want our students to become, and really what we want our graduates to go out as they go back out into industry to take to their future employers, so that they can, bring those characteristics with them and help to facilitate the right types of work environments and teamwork, fostering that notion of teamwork underneath the area that's necessary for them to be successful.
Thanks, John. And I will note for our viewers that you're seeing many of us with some cards in our laps. This is a periodic table. Perhaps it's already gone up on the screen. This is put out by letitripple.org, and it's this wonderful periodic table of sorts that lists various characteristics and character strengths. And it's what we're referring to during this conversation. Rashmi, same question for you regarding the College of Business. Are you focusing on some core characteristics for your students and alumni?
Well, we are. Actually, we're in the process of fundamentally redesigning some of our academic programs. And we're in the process of redesigning our core undergraduate business curriculum and to define learning outcomes. And many of those learning outcomes that we're defining are very much represented in this periodic table. So for instance, ethical intelligence. You know, is there actually such a thing? We talk about teaching ethics and how difficult that is, but there are different dimensions of teaching ethics. And ethical intelligence is a first one. Just the awareness of ethical dimension of issues. So ethical intelligence, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, analytical capabilities, and also spreadsheet skills, by the way. but these are going to be integrated right into the heart of our curriculum, because when it comes to character, the question of character and business, it is a burning live question for this country and for others. That is that, you know, as I wrote to many of our employees, business is the most powerful organized force for human betterment in the world. But it is a force for human betterment only if really anchored to character. So when I look at the periodic table and I think about our curriculum in the future, a couple of categories really jump out at me, and those are humanity and justice. And of course you look at the subcategories like love and kindness and social responsibility, teamwork and fairness, and these start to hit at the heart of business and management. And I think of John Mackey, who was the founder of Whole Foods, and a few years ago he wrote a book in which he asked the question, can we build a business based on love and trust rather than fear and stress? And that's a really spot-on comment, because in the United States, 180,000 people die every year from causes related to occupational stress. Now that's a large number, we're a large country, but if you compare us to our industrialized peers, that really represents extra mortality of 60,000. So the United States is an outlier in occupational stress in a bad way, as it is an outlier in life expectancy and infant mortality among developed countries. So for an industrialized country of our kind, if we were in line even with the practices elsewhere, where work is also stressful, there would be 60,000 fewer deaths every year, which of course that's one Vietnam War. Every year. So you think about that in context, and you think about business education and business curriculum, and I have a lot to say, but I'll make it short. And that is, I don't know that we've had character-based management paradigms. If you look over 100 years, management thinking has gone back and forth. It's oscillated like a yo-yo between rational management thoughts, paradigms, and normative ones. So on the rational side, you know, you have ideas like scientific management that led to the assembly line and Henry Ford and all that. And the idea really was to look at the worker as a tool that you can manipulate or that you can leverage for maximum productivity. And that's oscillated with more normative models like the human capital movement or human resource movement, which views the human being not as an object, but as a subject, a person with emotions and needs, but still with an instrumental view. How can we get that happy worker to be maximally productive? And these are really distinct from what I would call a character-based management paradigm, in which, to make it simple, I'd say that you view the human being as in need of growth and development, and you try to leverage that human being's needs for growth and development in order to run a successful business, but also in order for that person to thrive in all aspects of their life. So I think that in our business school, as we aim for the future, our Everest goal really is to develop a character-based business paradigm.
Thanks, Rashmi. It sounds like the pendulum is starting to swing in the business world and in academia towards more of a character-based framework. Jan, how about in healthcare, as you think about the character strengths that you'd like to see in your students and alumni and the profession generally? Are there a few that come to mind?
Well, there actually are more than I can speak to, I have to say. You know, I agree with my colleagues. Certainly the category of justice jumps right out. We talk a lot about the needs for great leadership because of the tremendous amount of transformation going on in what used to be called healthcare and is now called health more generally, as we try and bend the cost curve and we try and deliver services earlier and we try and think about prevention and more of a whole person and a person-centric kind of model for care delivery. So while all of that is true, as I read and talk to nurses around the country, for example, and I read social media posts, there's this constant ongoing tension between professionalism and the kind of intimate work that nurses do every day with patients, that deep personal connection. And so I see nurses struggling with that because part of our history has been don't get too close, don't get involved, you know, maintain this veneer of being the disconnected professional. And if I were to give some good advice today to providers, I would say, in the words of the great philosophers John Lennon and Paul McCartney, all we need is love. And I think love is missing, and I think we feel worried about how we can truly love our coworkers, truly love our employees, truly love our patients, truly love those that we engage with on teams, and that can be developed. Fortunately, our brains are highly neuroplastic from cradle to grave. So we're never done. We can always develop, and that is a very encouraging thing to think about in relation to these character traits. So I think it's time to bring love back into our world in the health professions, as well as optimism and gratitude. We are tremendously honored and privileged to be involved with people in times of their lives when they are most stressed. The most significant impacts that people have often center around their health, birth of a new child, development of a new family, death, physical ailment, disease, disability, and we're there. That's a tremendous honor and privilege. And I think if we can connect with that and connect with the love that we can engage with our patients, but also with those that we team with, those careers will be more fulfilling, more enriching, and the optimism trait will gain strength as well.
Well, thank you for sharing, and all of you for sharing the traits that you're most interested in and committed to. Although character is one of these terms that requires us to unpack it. It means different things to different people. My next question, I think I already know the answer to it, but I want to throw it out anyway because it's one of these big questions. And that is, can character be taught? And if so, how do we teach it? I think decades ago, there was mixed opinions in terms of the answer to that question. I think a lot of people felt, a lot of corners, a lot of pockets felt that no, you are born with it. But I think we're moving to an era now where no, this is something that can be developed. So Deb, let's take the teacher's college. It's a big question, but
Sure,
anyone
on the hot
listen.
seat.
No, anyone, please jump in. How are you teaching character? I know it's not an easy question.
Well, it's not an easy question, but if I were to believe that we were all stuck with the way we were and that we couldn't change, then that would put us in kind of a hopeless position, I think. And certainly as teachers, that's not what we believe and that's not where we want to be. I think that character can be developed. In some ways, I think there are, certainly through letitripple.org, there are lesson plans available. There's a number of activities available that teachers can look into to develop character, but I also think it needs to be modeled. And I also think it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to be called out when one observes it, either in one's students, in the classroom spontaneously, or called out in an interaction to say, you know, what we need right now is just a little love, if there's a dispute or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I think we need to go about character thinking that, well, yes, it can be taught, and I think that as parents and as teachers we can develop these traits, but also there's all kinds of ways to go about it, and we know that it takes, I think, 19 repetitions for something to be fully ingrained. So at 19 different opportunities in 1 year of a child's life, we would have to be underscoring that again and again.
Yeah.
And I'll open it up to others.
Spencer,
Ye-
I'd
yes.
like to make a comment that maybe takes a step back on that question of can character be taught, because there's this presumption that all the development occurs in the womb, and then from birth to 18 or 21, and then once you can drink alcohol, that's the end. That's the end of development. You know, that's the highest stage of human. Just kidding. But I think that is a faulty. The idea of the adult
Yes.
life course
Yes.
being fixed, that your set is flawed, and social science research indicates that, you know, we go through these punctuated equilibria all through the adult life course, and it happens every few years. You have a stable period of development, then you have this, you know, like the poet might have said, there's a divergence. You can go in one of two directions or several directions. You know, the stereotype of the middle-aged man with his midlife crisis, it actually has some support in research, in that when you reach these punctuated equilibrium points, either you progress to a higher level of psychological maturity or you regress. You want to go to an earlier phase, get the fast car, shove away all your responsibilities.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, actually, throughout the adult life course, there are periods in one's life in which you're especially receptive to the wisdom of the periodic table of character. And in fact, you really need to have that priming and preparation in order to navigate those periods of
Right.
punctuated equilibrium. So I think that we need to take a different view of the adult, not as fixed, and Jan referred to neuroplasticity. So I just wanted to provide that context. And I'd also say, without going into great detail, is that business education has, you know, if there's a business educator out there and an economist and a management professor who hasn't been humbled in the last 20 years, then they have a character problem. I mean, they're impervious to humbling, and there's been a great deal of, really a golden age of research on the teaching of ethics, and also the unpacking that teaching of ethics is not one thing. I mentioned ethical intelligence before, so even ethical awareness, ethical sensitivity, and role modeling, and really learning through engaged and experiential learning. So there's been a golden period of research and practice on the teaching of ethics, I'd say, in the last 20 years. So just to provide a little bit of context.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Jen, how about in health? How are you teaching these character strengths that you mentioned?
Well, it's interesting. A couple of years ago, we implemented a course for all of our undergraduate students in the College of Health that is really entirely dedicated to social and emotional learning. And a fundamental part of that is developing the skills to be reflective and introspective. So again, if you look at our chart here, you see this category here under wisdom, which talks about perspective. And perspective is a outgrowth, I would say, of reflection and introspection. And that's sort of turning things over in your mind, reviewing experiences that you've had, and looking at them through a new lens, and being willing to forgive yourself, being willing to unburden yourself from long-standing barriers that may have been in your own way of your own devising. So we spend a lot of time in that first month, in that first course, helping to call out some of these these skills, and primarily this reflection skill, because it does take time to be thoroughly reflective. It can be highly superficial in the first couple of experiences, and over time you get a little bit better at overturning the rocks in your history and thinking about what those mean, and that introspection brings wisdom. I think what it also brings is a sense of self-agency, a sense of ownership, if you will, for one's path. And I believe that's a foundation against which individuals can then see the value of character trait development. You know, I think one of the things, a miss that we've made in higher ed for many years has been this notion that, you know, you just work for the trophy. You work for the grade. It goes back to your comment about the resume skills. And we're all somewhat socialized in that way, in not just in higher ed, but you know, K-12 as well. You know, you're the A student, you're in the Bluebird class, or whatever category or label.
Fly with the eagles.
Fly with the eagles. You got it. And in reality, that mindset has been a real detractor, a real negative for the pursuit of lifelong learning, for the love of learning. For the joy of personal achievement in one's own time, in one's own way. And so I think, I feel that in many ways what we do here at WGU is to try and help people rediscover their love of learning, rediscover themselves, be honored for what they bring, and valued for what they bring, instead of putting everybody in a box and say everybody's going to go the same pace, everybody's going to do it the same way, and if you don't keep up, or you go too fast, or you fall back, then there's something wrong with you. And I think that's a big mistake that education has made for a very long time.
I've heard some themes throughout everyone's comments, and before jumping to a new question, John, did you want to address this question as well within IT?
Sure. You know, one of the things I was thinking about, you know, back to my kindergarten days, so Deb can relate to this being a teacher, but one of my favorite things to do was to play in a sandbox. And I think in relation to our IT students and the world in which they live, they really play in a giant sandbox. That's for many of them, that's their role. That's the space in which they create and innovate and facilitate the wonderful technologies that you and I get to utilize. But they have to remember a lot of these characteristics as they're playing in that sandbox. Things like kindness, being fair, realizing that there's a fair amount of forgiveness that you have to be able to be willing to display to your coworkers and to your peers, because you don't go into things to fail, but in that sandbox it's very much an experiential playground for us to figure out what does the future hold and how can we get there. There's an element of humility that our students and our graduates have to have as they move into the workforce, recognizing that they don't have all the answers, that they may in fact have to work as a team in that sandbox to be able to create or to perfect whatever that product is that they're trying to deliver to the general population. And so I just thought of
That's great.
the analogy of playing in a sandbox, and that's really our world in the College of IT. It's fun to think about all the things that we have to kind of develop and think about as we navigate that environment in which we find ourselves.
Thank you, John. It sounds like the road to character can be long, and is long for most of us. In fact, I think our president earlier this week stated, I think he saw this in a fast food restaurant, but it basically goes like this. It generally takes us longer to become the person that we want to be. And one of the themes that I've heard in this discussion is modeling these character strengths, modeling them and how important that is. And now I'm going to ask a question that may cause all of us to get really uncomfortable, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless. Is there an example in your life where someone modeled a character strength that has stuck with you, perhaps someone else or you in a particular situation? And would any of you like to share?
Well, I'll start that out because my father was a big guy about honesty. Honesty was always the best policy. Come clean, just tell it like it is. And honesty is one of the traits here on the periodic table of character traits, which I think is fabulous.
It was the only policy for my dad.
Okay, there you go. And it's both a blessing and a burden
It is.
because, you know, being honest sometimes is perhaps not being circumspect, another trait. And it took me a little while in my life, I think, to learn to balance those two things. I you know, staying honest, but then also knowing how honesty can be conveyed with grace or sometimes with a little too much edge. Anyone else?
Thanks for sharing that, Dad. That's a great story.
You know, I remember as a young person going through my grade school and middle school years, often finding myself bored. I articulated that once around the dinner table to my mom and dad, and my dad took me out. We lived on a farm. He took me out into the cow pasture and brought out my mother's container of flour and floured off a little kind of 4x4 square and said, "John, I want you to pick up every rock in this little area." And so I did. He left me, he turned his back and went about doing some other chores and came back about a half hour later, and I thought I'd done a pretty good job. He said, did you get all the rocks, put them in the wheelbarrow? And I said, "Well, I think I did, Dad." And he found a few. He found that I had overlooked a few, and he said, "You know, why do you think you missed these few rocks, John?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He says, "Did you get bored as you were picking up the rocks?" And so he kind of taught me a visual lesson that day that not everything in life is exciting, right? But things should be meaningful for you. And he taught me a really good lesson that day that my educational journey I was on, my parents were sacrificing tremendously for me to be able to go through that journey, and that perhaps I could change my perspective or attitude just a little bit and gain a greater love of learning. And that was really instrumental for me for wanting to go back into higher education about 16 years ago. That love of learning that my own father taught me with a container of flour, picking up a few rocks after I had said I was bored one too many times with school and whatever else was going on. But I think we all have, you know, chances to go through that reflective exercise from time to time.
Fantastic.
John, you know I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
And that is, have you passed on this flower exercise to your family members?
Yeah, not. I haven't. My wife won't let me near the flour container. I make a big enough mess in the house. But we've done it in other ways.
Yeah.
I think we've found ways to be creative with our kids.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
You know, Spencer, our president, Scott Pulsifer, has kind of been on a Mr. Rogers theme lately. The film Won't You Be My Neighbor? And I know that there's one question in there in which I think it was Fred Rogers asks you to recollect the people who have given you so much in your life, you know, who've given you unconditional love and care. I can't phrase it exactly, but it's towards the end of the movie. And Scott frequently has been asking us to remember that. It's wonderful actually to think of all the people who've helped you and who've modeled behaviors. And as you're as my colleagues and friends here are discussing this, I mean, I'm having images pop into my head. Certainly we remember our fathers and mothers very much. I know that if you're indulging us, so I'll tell you a very odd and homely story. My father was a man of great conviction, and he was a burn surgeon, but he was completely led by an ethic of care. He felt that he was seeing the divine face to face in the form of his patients. I mean, there was no doubt, and he spoke openly that this is service of that sort. It's not compassionate help. He's serving. It's his privilege to serve. But here's a homely example. I had decided to pursue academia, and it was the late 90s, and you could make much better money in the private sector. Why finish your PhD? But I decided, okay, no, I want to be a professor. I would finish my PhD. So I was looking for a job. And I was putting together portfolios where you've got to staple all these documents together, put them in a manila envelope. This is the dark ages, by the way. put it in the manila envelope.
What, paper?
No,
manila?
paper, staples, and by the way, a manual stapler in the
Absolutely.
manila envelope. Now, I was under great time stress, and this was taking a long time. In order to execute, 8 perfect staples per package and send out 30, that took a long time, and I was frustrated that it seemed like an hour or more of time had gone. I complained to my father. I referred to somebody else I knew who had maybe taken an easier road or was successful, and I knew wasn't necessarily so honest. And I said, look, his life is so easy, and here I am spending half my day stapling. And my father did not hesitate. He didn't, no empathy, said, you have to be prepared to pay the price for your convictions without hesitation. And there were many, many moments like that. I can talk about professors who, back in the day, folks, universities weren't so student obsessed. University of Michigan, as an undergraduate, was kind of not student obsessed. But there was a professor towards the end who, he signaled, he just, to put it this way, showed me a moment of kindness. It was like Androcles and the lion. And I remember it to this day. I could tell you the story, but just moments of kindness like that stay with you after 30 years. It's quite wonderful.
Cool.
But yeah, it's a wonderful question because it's causing me to remember how many people have helped me in the course of my life.
Wow, what a powerful story. All of your stories are very, very powerful. And it looks like our time is up, and now we'll segue into Q&A from our viewers. I think a number of our viewers have posted questions, and so we'll take them now as they are queuing up.
And put them in the comments section.
Yes, that's right. Put them in the comment section. While these are queuing up, I'm reminded, Rashmi, I read an article from a business publication about the younger generation. I think they were sending in absentee ballots, and the biggest barrier to them doing that was they didn't know where to get stamps. They didn't know how to. They didn't know how to buy stamps. Some things that we take for that we take for granted. That's right.
While we're waiting for the questions to come up, I just wanted to mention that we're very interested in how others are feeling. We'll get some of that in the questions, how others are responding to this whole notion of Character Day. We think of this as something that will become a part of our DNA at WGU. We think of it as being a movement that we're just standing on the edge of. This is just the very beginning. So we would really like to encourage people to give us their feedback and to tell us how they think WGU can continue to participate in Character Day, not just as a day. This isn't Christmas or Easter, but it's a year-long type of endeavor. So hopefully we'll get some comments and some engagement from our students and faculty and employees.
That's an excellent point, Jan. It looks like we're getting some comments now. So, first question, nursing and teachers have disposition statement guidelines. Rashmi, this question is for you. Do you believe the College of Business will have such guidelines for your students moving forward? So, talking about the dispositions within the Teachers College, is there an analog within the College of Business?
Let me first say that we're moving ahead this year and becoming signatories to the Principles for Responsible Management Education, which is a United Nations initiative. So core values for the business college will be identified. But actually, I would ask Jan first just to help me understand how the College of Health Professions establishes and utilizes these dispositions, and then maybe I can give a more informed answer.
Well, I would say that we talk a lot in nursing education in particular, and in the other health professions education, about some of the more sort of traditional aspects, maybe not totally represented here, but so there are codes, professional codes of ethics that are deeply embedded into all of our courses. The ANA Code of Ethics, for example, is one such. There are also things like offshoots of that have to do with privacy, confidentiality, those kinds of things in the domain of ethics. In the College of Health, our conceptual framework for the nursing programs is that nurses are scientists, detectives, and managers of the healing environment. So there are attributes in those three roles that are reflected here in the periodic table of elements. We don't have a set of specific dispositions, as Deb has referenced, 8 dispositions beyond those frameworks that I've mentioned, the codes of ethics and the roles of the nurse. But I think each of those aspects have,
Right.
if you drill down a little
Yeah.
bit, they're aspects
Right.
of the character traits.
So business is not a single organized, more codified profession as teaching and nursing is, but I think that core values and a code of ethics are essential. And so the answer to the question is yes, after our own fashion we will do this, and we will engage all of our faculty, staff, and also our students in generating this, these core values and professional dispositions and really a code of ethics. I think that is essential, and I think that we'll engage the whole community so that it's really something that comes from the grassroots. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
And I would just say too that there's no reason, at least from my perspective in the College of Health, that there's nothing to say that we don't have more work to do in this area. I think we do have more work to do. I think we rely heavily because of the number of nursing students that we serve on things like the ANA Code of Ethics, et cetera. But I think as our health professions portfolio has grown, we have many more individuals in the College of Health who have different practices
Sure.
in health professions, and I would welcome them to step forward and let's find that common framework of core values for the College of Health.
And since actually healthcare management is a point of intersection between our colleges,
That might be a place to start.
yeah, I think that, right, ethical codes and dispositions for those managers who work in the healthcare industry is a very good question. So I think it's a very challenging question. The answer is yes, but we have work to do quite a bit of work to do to get to that point.
Yeah.
And perhaps an equally challenging question that just came in from one of our viewers. How does WGU make Character Day more than just today? What are we planning to do to continue this? And Jen, I know you've talked a little bit about this, but John, I want to turn this question to you. I know before this conversation we were talking offline about some of the things that your staff are doing or that you're aware of.
Sure. I think there's some creative things we have sent out to our staff and we'll be sharing, I think, with our students and our alumni as we go along. There's a number of different resources that are out there that can help us to sustain this. But we as a small leadership group, even expanding our circle a little bit to some of our peers and colleagues, probably can't create the groundswell. We need all of you to be able to find creative ways to help to participate or facilitate what Character Day can be for you. Today we're celebrating it as a kind of a national event or a global event, but it's one of those things that Character Day ought to be celebrated every day, that we wake up and put our shoes and socks on and go about our life, whether it's to work or to school or whatever it might be. And so I think we need to find some people that are passionate about this, that will join us in the cause that we've decided we're going to start and help to facilitate here at WGU. And it'll happen one person at a time, one experience at a time, one activity at a time, but I do believe that our people are the key to helping us to sustain this beyond just today.
Other comments on that point?
Well, we talked about having some follow-up events after this, perhaps opportunities to engage each of the colleges specifically, perhaps having guest speakers and doing more Facebook Live events. So I think we've only begun to scratch the surface. And as John has mentioned, wide open for suggestions and contributions from all our listeners and beyond.
Well, and as an earlier questioner asked about dispositions, there are many ways that we need to institutionalize issues of character, elements of character, into our, not only into our curriculum and all, but into the very identity and core values of our colleges. So I think that the leadership, the academic and operational leadership of the colleges is deeply committed. I think we're fortunate to have, on the basis of a text message, Jan and Deb mobilized a lot of zeal around this question, because I think there are deep reservoirs of commitment. So we will continue to work hard to institutionalize this throughout WGU.
Well, and I think one simple example, as I look at the footwear of the panelists here, one could be, Character Day socks, John. Those are some awesome.
There we go. I need a
those are-
pair.
those are some
Sign me up.
awesome,
Sign me up.
awesome socks.
Yes.
John's socks are clearly a reference to the leadership principle of ownership that we have
Yes.
here at WGU.
Yes, yes.
And his tie, too.
And
I do have my tie.
And tie.
I've
Look
got
at
my
that.
WGU tie.
Yeah. And commitment.
Well, a question just came in. This is an interesting one. Which traits on the periodic table are really lacking in society today? Do any stand out?
In teaching, I think one of the traits that we often see missing right now, because it's very public, bullying, harassment, other things that teachers are experiencing in the classroom, I think that kindness.
Kindness.
Yeah, I think
It's hard to comment because, of course, it has to be researched and validated.
Yes.
But as an observer, I would look at the temperance column, and I would look at forgiveness and humility and self-control. This column is a good one to identify. I think certainly forgiveness as an art is probably evergreen. But humility, right? I think that there was research by Jeannie Twenge years ago, came out in a book called Generation Me. Now this is controversial as to whether narcissism was increasing over time or whether it was just kind of a generational effect, that narcissism is high at a certain age point and then you become more humble. But I do think humility, when I encounter people who are genuinely humble, it's extremely refreshing. It's very powerful. It stands out. I think that, frankly, self-control, impulse control, for the digital age, and where is it? Self-control.
get it out.
This gratification engine here. So I think that self-control is one worth highlighting simply because it's being challenged more in this age.
I think one of the forgotten characters or virtues as well is maybe that characteristic of gratitude, that we have so much at our disposal today in society that I think all of us, including myself, we tend to take advantage of what's really there and available to us, forgetting to be grateful for the fact that 20, 30 years ago, probably 95, 97% of the things that we enjoy today weren't even in existence. I mean, so much of the technological advances that we enjoy today have evolved over the last 15 to 20 years. And will continue to do so. They'll continue to wipe out the things that our generation has enjoyed 10, 15 years down the road. They'll be new and evolutionary. And so that notion of gratitude, I think, is really
John,
key.
Even the perspective that,
Yes.
that despite everything, as Warren Buffett would say, if you were born in the United States, you've won the lottery of a certain kind, having
Yeah.
having traveled all around the world, having just been in India a month ago, where there's been lots of economic growth and new prosperity. But the Americans don't really have a perspective on how richly blessed they are materially, how many material blessings of life they have. So I think that perspective, you're very wise to comment.
Well, and I would just add that I think going along with these devices that demand so much of our time now, we really find ourselves rushing from one thing to the next, multitasking. We've really lost the ability to just stop, pause, notice the beautiful sunset, notice that it's a gorgeous day out, notice that it's raining, notice that there's art hanging on the walls. I mean, this whole concept of finding richness in every moment and recognizing that and pausing. I think we are in a rush all the time, and that's a deep lack that we all have, and it's something that we have to develop great awareness around and mindfulness around, to stop, pause, recognize the beauty of the moment, the beauty of the interaction, the beauty of the art. Those are very enriching things that, as Rashmi has said, you put that in your reservoir, and when the going gets tough, you've got something to draw on.
Yeah,
You know, and Jan, while there is appreciation of beauty here within the periodic table, I think that your reference to mindfulness, if I were to add my 2 cents to this, I would add mindfulness as a separate virtue, as a separate character trait. So.
I agree.
In fact, as I looked over this periodic table, the one that stood out to me was humility. It's often been referred to as the mother of all virtues. And as I was preparing for this, it really hit home to me that people with true humility are able to perform an accurate assessment on where their deficiencies are.
Good
And so it
point.
really serves as that foundational virtue. And then the other thing that stood out to me is that as we talk about virtues, it really goes back to what is the purpose of life? What is a good life? And I think we can end with where we started with David Brooks, going back to those resume virtues and those eulogy virtues. I think in his assessment, and I think many people would agree with him, that if we're so focused on the resume virtues, it's not to say we won't have a good life, but it won't be as deeply satisfying.
That's right.
A life to really develop in meaningful ways these other strengths. It looks like we have time for one more question. Rashmi, this is directed to you. In what ways are there some trainings, are there some initiatives that the College of Business is using to help in character development?
Well, thank you. Wonderful question. Luckily, there's only a minute left. Actually, this is really at the core of some of our initiatives. The idea, I referred to the business cores being restructured and having outcomes for the core themselves, which will be largely, the emotional intelligence portfolio, ethical intelligence, which can also form a portfolio of cultural intelligence. So we're really going to weave this within our curriculum and also integrate sustainability management within the rewriting of our competencies. So the most basic element of our business curriculum is going to be informed by character going forward.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we've come to the end of our live session, but before we wrap up, I'm going to put us all on the spot. This is a lightning round. This is, I think, one way for us to continue this conversation. So Rashmi, we'll start with you. Looking at this periodic table, I want you to list the character strength that you're going to focus on over the next few months.
Definitely it would be teamwork.
Teamwork. Jan?
Yeah.
I would say social intelligence.
Social intelligence. I'm going to go with humility. Deb?
Oh gosh, perspective.
Perspective. And John?
Gratitude.
Gratitude. All very good ones. Very good ones. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for being on this panel. I have learned
Thank you.
so
Thank
much
you, Spencer.
from all of you. You've helped me, I think, develop a little bit with my character. And thank the viewers for tuning in and providing your comments. This is such a wonderful topic, and I'm excited to see us continue this conversation moving forward. And with that, we will sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fun.